The reason it's so hard to talk about capitalism today is because we can't agree on whether or not capitalism freed us or bound us in a new way. As a political philosopher, I can tell you that Marx understood this, gave us the concept of primitive accumulation, which more people should know about because it tells us about the foundations of the history of capitalism and why and how we transitioned from feudalism to capitalism in the first place. Now, if you've been following along, you know from part one that primitive accumulation is the process by which human beings gain the capital necessary to get capitalism off the ground. It tells us how human societies in Europe transformed from being feudalist to being capitalist. This process was not just about getting enough money to make capitalism possible. It was also social. It was about transforming the social relationships in society such that capitalism could make sense as a system. Now, what does this really mean? It centers on the issue of freedom because Marx explains that capitalism socializes people into understanding themselves in terms of being a free laborer. And freedom has a double meaning here. Number one, it was about freedom from subsistence of the land. So it was thought that capitalism would free the individual from having to live off the land. So that's the first kind of freedom. The second kind of freedom had to do with the freedom to sell one's labor on the market. In other words, to engage in profit maximizing activities by selling labor to the capitalist. It's important to note that Marx is using the word freedom here somewhat ironically because he does not think this is true freedom, but he knows that this is the discourse or the way in which people were talking about what freedom looks like within capitalism. And ultimately for Marx, this isn't true freedom because it still involves the exploitation of the proletariat by those who own the means of production. This helps us understand Marx's position on freedom, but I haven't yet talked about the issue of women because it was only men in this time period, for the most part, who were going and selling their labor on the market. So what were women doing? That I will be talking about in part 3, and I'm sorry that was supposed to be part 2, but I realized I had to explain all this first. But I'm curious to hear from you whether you learned in school growing up that capitalism was something that granted human beings freedom.